Well, we are just so grateful that you've joined us for another edition of Curiosity, Not Judgment. Welcome in. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
And for those of you that are watching this on YouTube, you can notice that we have a pretty spectacular backdrop behind us. And no, that is not artificial, that is the real deal. We're sitting in front of a window very near Lake Tahoe.
Yeah, we're on the north side. Those of you who are geography experts will know that about 2/3 of the shoreline of Lake Tahoe is in California, and a third is in Nevada. It's right on the border. We're on the California side, so to speak, and the north side. And we flew into Reno and came down to this wonderful place, and we're here enjoying this view at a really nice conference. And so it's good to get away and think about life and things. And you know, one of the speakers today tickled our fancy on some items, and we thought we'd speak about that.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a 30-second aside just to mention that this is the site of where the Winter Games in 1960 were held. And so I think literally the resort that we're sitting in was kind of the hub of activity back then, what 64 years ago, which is amazing. And so yeah, I think part of the grandeur of this place is just imagining what it took to transform this mountain community into a televised sporting event.
Yeah, for the world. It's not just a televised sporting event. This is the Winter Olympics. And trying to think about everything from ice skating to skiing to, you know, slalom, all of it. And and they did a great job back then.
They did. So we, as Gary mentioned, wanted to talk a little bit about one of the presenters' comments this morning that really just got us thinking, and it is kind of that difference in how we view busyness versus being in a hurry. And that's kind of a sloppy overview of what he presented, but I know that really made an impact on you.
Yeah, you know, their busyness is kind of an outward condition. It's am I busy, am I not? Am I accomplishing lots of things, am I not? Is my work meaningful? All of those things we associate with the word busy. A lot of us try to look busy, and some of us, and I have fallen victim myself to this, the more busy we are, the more we feel like our self-worth is tied to. It's you know, if I'm busy, then I'm worth something. And I think that there's a whole bunch wrapped up in the word busy. Hurried is more of an inward state of mind. Hurried is more of a, how do I feel hurried? Do I feel under pressure to get more done? Do I feel like I'm in a hurry? And I think that when you're in that condition, you sometimes miss things. We sometimes don't do the best by our relationships. And if we can be busy without hurried, that may be a good way to be. I don't know. I'm curious about that.
I am curious about it as well. And I want to give credit where credit is due. So the presenter that we saw this morning, Jordan Rayner is his name, and he had written a book that we had gone through together as a small group called Redeeming Your Time. He is on the cusp of, or I guess it is out now, the new book that he's published, which, forgive me, I don't remember off the top of my head. But his focus really is, how do we work effectively? How do we work efficiently? And how do we not get into this place of burnout and overwhelm? And so much of what he was addressing this morning was to a room full of business leaders, and how do we make some of those distinctions in how we're looking at our day, how we're parsing out our schedule, how we are allowing certain things to kind of consume us, and how can we change our behaviors around that. And so this is really where that curiosity comes in about that busyness versus the hurried mentality, and can we do something to reset us internally so that we have more peace of mind as we have a full schedule and we have to see to all the things that need to get done, but without that burden of that weight of mind.
Yeah, you know, I'm visualizing an emergency room, right, with lots of busyness, lots of urgent matters, and you will see some people really scurrying around and almost like in a panic mode all the time, and you see some people that just kind of like they're the calm in the storm. You know, nothing really rattles them. They kind of can keep their heads and wits about them. You can tell that they're just going and doing exactly what needs to be done at the right time, without kind of freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all can think of people in our lives that get a lot accomplished. They're very busy people, but they don't seem hurried, and that's very attractive.
Yeah.
It's something that I would aspire to, and I don't pull it off very well all the time. And it's one of those things where if you see people in a frenzied situation and you find one person who doesn't seem frenzied, don't you just gravitate to that person and think, okay, this person's probably got the answer?
Yeah. I don't know if there is a correlation here, but my mind goes to this space of cell phone usage and the actual physiological response that happens when we are going from thing to thing on our cell phone, scrolling social media, getting the ping of emails, getting the ping of text messages, and kind of that serotonin dump that happens in the brain. And there's something that it does to you. And that is why there is very really a cell phone addiction that's happening, because we love that feeling of, oh, I matter, I'm important, something needs my attention, something needs my notice. And we get to that place where when we have that artificial response that's happening over and over and over again from technology, it gets more difficult to find and appreciate the natural kind of excitement in the regular normal world, I'm going to say in loose quotes. And I wonder if we also have that artificial kind of high from busyness as we make it a hurried mentality. So we are in our brains like, quick this, now this, and shifting gears very fast mentally. But when you choose to say, okay, I know the busyness is there, and I know there are lots of tasks to be accomplished, but I'm not going to allow my mindset to go into that hurried frenzy. Does it do something to your chemical balance in your head? And I don't know, I'm processing this lifetime, but I'm just thinking through how we have just changed as a people because of technology and cell phones and this hurried way of life.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. He at a different part of his talk, making a different point, showed a picture of a mail truck, and it was funny because his message was, you have to control your inbox. You have to control how you receive the myriad messages you get during the day. And he says, so why am I showing a mail truck, right? That's snail mail. And he says, well, here's the analogy. Imagine that a mail truck pulls up in front of your house 250 times a day. And the person gets out and comes to your door, and you get up and answer it every single time. And you stop what you're doing, even if it's important work, and you get up and you answer the door. And how that's busyness in combination with a hurried attitude, like, I've got to get this done. I've got to answer the door. Who knows if it's important or not? We don't know. Is it important? Is it not important? It generally is, especially in this season right now, as we've got an election coming up. And so, how can we avoid the hurried inward feeling and the associated actions that spring from that feeling? If we fill ourselves with hurriedness, we're going to act differently than if we were calm and at peace and acting on our values and prioritizing properly and making sure that the busyness doesn't get to us.
Well, and I think it really is being intentional to eliminate potential burnout, because the more we are in that heightened emotional state, feeling that hurriedness inside of us, whether it's because I've got to hurry and respond to this email, hurry and respond to a text, or hurry and do this next task, that heightened state of alertness and always being on, it does something to you, and you cannot maintain that posture and that mentality for very long before you begin to feel just overwhelmed and burnt out. And I think that's why we so often think about, escaping whatever it is that has consumed our thought life. But the other point that he brought up, which I thought was so key, and I loved it, and it's hard for me to imagine kind of doing a real reset on my life, is if the bulk of your work involves the mind, you need to rest doing something physical.
With your hands.
Rest with your hands. Or conversely, if the bulk of your work is with your hands, you rest with your mind.
Right.
So if you're a computer, answering emails, Zoom meetings all day kind of a person, when it's time for you to take a break, you need to do something physical. Play an instrument, go do something in the garden, go do something in the kitchen, right? But not to get on the computer or waste time scrolling social media. And that is such a counterintuitive message in today's world, right? Because you got any little break of time and you're trying to rest your brain, you think, and so you open up a game or you open up social media or it's just 10 minutes, just gonna see what's going on Instagram.
Yeah, and that's the exact opposite of what you should do. He brought up a really good example of that, and it was Winston Churchill. And Winston Churchill, as a statesman, especially during the war, he was, always working with his mind. He was strategizing. He was trying to think of what he could do to withstand the onslaught that the whole country was trying to bear, and then form an effective attack. And I did not know this. I knew that he was a painter. I did know that, but I didn't know that he scheduled breaks in his day to paint. And I did not know that he was laying 200 bricks a day. He was going and building a wall in his house in his garden, and he would go out and lay 200 bricks a day. So he really got the principle of, if you're working with your mind, rest with your hands, and vice versa. And I think that's something that can help us in staying still being busy, but staying unhurried.
Yeah, and I love it, and implementing it is another thing altogether, right?
Totally.
And to begin to ask some of those curious questions that, okay, I know things are off balance with me. I know I have a hurried mindset. I know that I've got an imbalance in the way that I use my time. So how now do I begin to shift the way that I do things? And, a big part of it is carving out a schedule for yourself and carving out an expectation for others, so that you can clearly communicate, this is what I'm doing, so that people don't take offense. They don't, get all bothered, because if you were normally somebody who responded to every text message within 30 seconds, if you're going to say, I'm going to lay off that because this is not healthy for my brain, it has to be communicated.
Yeah, and I would back up even more with the curious questions and just say, do I feel hurried at times? Is it negatively affecting my life, my relationships, the people, the things around me, the tasks that I need to get done? Do I need to change that? So, number one. And number two is, do I think I can change, right? So how motivated am I to change? And then, do I think I can? And if the answers to those are yes, or on a scale of 10, 6 or more, well then, how could I accomplish that? What are some things I need to do? Do I need to take a break? Do I need to prioritize better? Do I need to set expectations with the people around me who are asking for things to be done by me better? Do I need to set expectations around, one of the other suggestions was, make it clear to people that I'm going to respond to my emails at 10 o'clock and noon and 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Or 10, 2, and 5, whatever. And then outside of those, if you really need to get a hold of me, you need to use a different method. Can I set up my environment and my context to be more of an unhurried stance towards busyness, and would that increase my effectiveness? And if the answer to that is yes, well then you'll have the intrinsic motivation. It's not somebody telling you get your act together. You will say, okay, what could I do? What would be useful for me? And it's going to be different for each one of us.
Sure.
But what would be useful for me to be less hurried and more effective?
I'm going to actually back up even one more step beyond that. I think those are excellent questions, but I will say this is something that I struggle with, because it does do something physiological to you when you are in that hurried mode. Are you a little addicted to that feeling? And I think that maybe is one of the beginning questions. And if so, what do you need to do to give yourself permission to break that addiction off? I know I've shared this in a past podcast, but worry is one of those feelings that I would almost put in the same category as hurriedness, because when there is a negative situation that you're trying to deal with that is out of your control, for me, I came to realize that if I at least worried about it, I felt like I was doing something.
Sure.
And so in the camp of hurried, if you are somebody who has a lot of demands on your time and you have a sense of importance about the work that you do, the role that you play, is there a feeling in the hurriedness that is gratifying, that makes you feel a kind of a sense of accomplishment that you might need to reevaluate if you let it go?
Yeah, and this is the category of old paradigms or old ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Why have you come to this conclusion that the busier I am, the better off I am,
Mm-hmm.
or the more hurried I am, or the more hurried I appear, or the more I feel like people can see in me that everything is urgent? Is that something that I aspire to? Is it something that I'm intentionally trying to show? And where does that come from?
Yeah.
Am I trying to prove something to someone? Do I have an underlying fear of not feeling like I'm good enough, or I'm not performing well enough? And is that serving me? Is that something that is being more useful in my relationships and in my ability to get tasks completed?
Mm-hmm.
Even, I mean, you could talk about a vicious cycle where the more hurried we feel, the less we actually get done.
Right.
So the more hurried we feel.
Mm-hmm.
And can we reverse that into a virtuous cycle?
Well, and something you said just triggered another thought within me about where does that idea come from? Where's that notion come from? And we talked last week about stories, and there may well have been a story from the past that maybe you got busted at work one time when you were, I don't know, you were playing solitaire on the computer and somebody walked up behind you and said something, right? There may be an instance from your past, a story from your past, that is making a mental link now to this sense of, I have to be hurried. I have to give the impression that I'm always on. I'm always going to respond, because if not, people think I'm this.
Yeah. Another part of this is, how do we handle the millions of tasks in our head?
Mm-hmm.
And just recently, a couple of different sources have hit me with the same thing. And that is, if you think of something, if you start it within 5 seconds, then you've got a chance of getting it done. And if you don't, because I'm a procrastinator, and if you don't do something within 5 seconds, the odds are you're not going to do it. Or it's going to stay in that list of stuff that's in your head that's saying, hey, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. You haven't done me yet. And so I think more and more I'm thinking, if something's coming into my brain, something in the environment is making that come in my brain. If it's something I can do quickly, if it's David Allen used to have the 2-minute rule. If you think of something and it can be done in 2 minutes, just do it. Just get it off your plate.
Yeah.
And then that will help us feel like maybe we don't have so much to accomplish. And then if you're not going to do it, well, then write it down.
Yeah.
So that your brain knows that you are going to deal with this in the future. Because if you don't write it down, then it's just going to stay muddled up there with the 3,000 other things going on, at least in my brain. And then that's what leads to that stress and that sense of hurriedness.
Yeah. I do want to circle back to the very beginning scenario that you painted about, if there's a crisis and there's lots to be done, and yet somebody is operating in that kind of place of peace and stillness, and how naturally folks want to gravitate towards them. That is so true, and yet somehow we paint a different picture in our own minds. And we think, maybe if I prove myself to be super efficient and super productive, then people are going to want me to be involved. But the opposite is true. That's especially right. In times of crises. We want somebody who's got their head on their shoulders, that they are regulating themselves, because then they can help assist others. And so it's just amazing to me what we assume versus what we actually need in the moment, and how we can really begin to be curious about, why do I think this of myself? Why is this perception present? and what do I need to do to begin the first steps towards change?
Yeah, and can I pause instead of, okay, I discern that something needs to be done, and can I pause and just ask questions about it, and where does this fall in my priorities, and how does this serve my long-term goals, and is this something that I should even be doing? Should I write it down for later? Should I do it now?
Yeah.
Can we pause and ask a couple of questions? That whole thing I just went through took less than 20 seconds. And yet, how often, I'll speak for me, how often do I find myself just figuring out, how do I get this one thing done so I can jump to the next thing?
Yeah.
How do I get this appointment done? How do I get this meeting over with, and get everybody nodding their heads in the same direction? Hopefully, as soon as we hang up, they're not nodding their head in a different direction and saying how crazy I am. And then moving on to the next thing, as opposed to, that, and we come back to this a lot, that little bit of reflection time that can go so far in determining how stressed we are, how hurried we are.
So there was approximately 50 questions or so that we threw out during the course of this episode for you to consider. But again, I certainly hope that every episode, there's something in there that causes you to pause and causes you to ask some questions of yourself and of your environment and of the way that you do things, because that's really the motivation here. We want to be able to kind of percolate some questions within you that ultimately leads you to discover a better way to do life and to do relationship, and that really, I would say, is the number one objective.
Yeah, and look, if you're healthy, you're growing, and what we don't want to do, we call this curiosity, not judgment. Don't ever judge that you are stuck in this way and you cannot grow and change. Do not ever judge that you're just not wired to do things more effectively or more calmly, or that you don't have the time to do this or that, or write down your values or your long-term goals and see how the activities fit into that. It's that judgment. It's that I'm stuck and I'm just going to be stuck that is really the killer here.
Yeah. So, as always, we welcome your feedback. We welcome anything that you want to share about some of the journeys that you have been on regarding curious questions you've asked of yourself and how that may have changed your environment. Always, you can reach us on the website, curiositynotjudgment.com, and of course, you can comment on the YouTube channel. Any closing thoughts?
I would just say, take care, try to practice being busy but not hurried.
Good words. All right, we'll see you back next week. Unfortunately, not from the beautiful Tahoe area. We'll be back, we'll be back in Albuquerque, but eager to catch up with you once again. You guys have a great week.
Take care.